everybody, to the Hot Rod Pod, where it all began. Brian Loans, lead broadcaster for the NHRA, and John McGann, the editor-in-chief of Hot Rod Magazine. We're at the PRI show, the Performance Racing Industry Show. We're going to talk to a racer, kind of unparalleled racer in American motorsports.
For sure.
Tony Stewart is our guest on this show.
That was crazy. You and David helped land that. I was absolutely stunned, and also a little bit intimidated to like meet somebody like Tony's caliber. I actually was off camera for this, but I sat right there in the booth and watched the whole episode. It was really great conversation.
Me and Freiberger in with Tony Stewart. This is a guy who's a member of 6 racing halls of fame, an IndyCar champion, a multi-time NASCAR champion, a champion in sprint cars, go-karts, a guy who ran the Indianapolis 500 and the Coke 600 on the same day twice over the course of his career. He is the modern-day A.J. Foyt, and he is the subject of this episode. We're here at the PRI Show 2023, joined by David Freiberger, and our guest on this episode, Mr. Tony Stewart. How you doing, man?
I'm good, bud.
So this is going to be a fun exploration of a lot of different things, and you've been a mover, shaker, headline maker guy in a lot of different ways in racing for a long time, but I kind of want to talk about what was announced at the PRI Show, and it is, as we say this, it's December of 2023. The big significant announcement that was made just yesterday at this show involving you and your wife, Leah Pruitt.
Well, yeah, she made news. I was just the byproduct of it. But, it's Leah had her best season ever in the sport, finishing 3rd in Top Fuel. And, literally last year, multiple times during the season, the discussions that she brought up about wanting to start a family. And we had talked about it over a year ago. And literally, I spent the first 30 seconds of the conversation in husband mode and spent the next 9.5 minutes in car owner mode. At the end of the 10 minutes, I'm like, if I don't stop talking, I'm not going to have to worry about this. I'll be divorced. So the moral of the story with that is we agreed that I wanted her to make the decision on when she wanted to do this. Because for us, we can start a family and just go about our business and then wait for the easy bake oven to happen in 9.5 months. For her, as a professional female racer, that messes your whole season up.
Yeah.
And depending on when that happens, it could mess 2 seasons up. So literally, that's why we decided I wanted her to have the ability. I knew that was a tough decision anyway. It should be her decision on when she wants to do this. So I just said, let me know when I need to start buying stuff. So, and that's where I left it. But that's what Leah's plan was, and worked through it during the summer. I wasn't on the list initially. I didn't want to be on the list initially.
That was my next question, is I think when we all saw you get in the A fuel car, the foregone conclusion is, Tony's going to drive Top Fuel. Were you the first choice for the seat when you knew that Leah was stepping out?
The first time it was brought up was in the spring, and she asked me if I wanted to be on that list, and we'd started the list already, and she goes, do you want to be on that list? I said, absolutely not. I said, I haven't caught up to the alcohol car yet. But this was never a plan. This was never part of a master plan of, we're going to run top alcohol so we can get into a Top Fuel or funny car someday. That was not the intention. The whole intention of running the alcohol car was I get to race, and then I change. I get to watch my cars race.
Yeah.
So it was the best of both worlds for me. But, having the season that we had with the A Fuel car, honestly, the last third of the season was rough for us. We got off track, couldn't figure out what the problems were, but the part of that helped me as a driver was it was shaking all the time. I was having to pedal, and because of that, I learned how to pedal the car. So the more that I did it, the better I got at it. And honestly, in the fall when it came back up, we had narrowed it down to Lyle Barnett, and I was excited about it. I love Lyle. Leah loves Lyle.
Yep.
And he's a badass pro mod driver.
He's a hell of a racer.
If I was going to put anybody in it, that's the guy I would want. And we've been friends ever since I met Leah. So I was comfortable with that. But Leah said, "Are you sure you don't want to be on this list?" I'm like, "Well, right now, I'm all right now. I feel a little more confident." But somebody asked me last night. They said, "Are you ready?" And I'm like, "How do you know if you're ready?" I'm already running the 3rd fastest class that NHRA has. The only 2 that are faster than us are funny car and Top Fuel.
Yeah.
So it's like I've done. I feel like another year in the alcohol class would have been more ideal to make this jump. But when your wife says, "Hey, I want to start a family," and think you should be on the list, what do you tell her? No.
Yeah. Well, and for the edification of the audience, I think we should explain. You have your fuel license. You've got 26 passes or something like
20.
that. So 20. Yeah, so it's not your first barbecue, but on the other hand, that's still intimidating, isn't it?
Yeah, and barbecue is what I feel like I'm getting into. I feel like the rod's going through me, and they're just cranking me over the fire right now. But,
Yeah.
you know, but like I say, you never know when it's time. I mean, I don't know any driver that says, yes, this is the time. You don't know what you don't know, but I've ran the top fuel car enough to know there's a lot of things that can go wrong, and there's a lot of things that if you're not on top of your game and you're not doing your job as a driver, you can cost your team a lot of money.
Yep.
So when the guy that's going to drive the car also has to pay the bills, puts a little more emphasis on not sucking.
But look, and I think you've done you've made this move several times in your career, and I brought it up yesterday when we talked, but I think it's worth discussing. Like, you've always been overly cautious, in my opinion, just looking back at your history, to make advancements. Like, you've always taken the extra time, and I think one of the things people respected about you when you came into drag racing was that it wasn't this immediate leap into a top fuel car and look at me, I'm doing it. It was the respect of what that car is, and you still show it the car respect with how you're doing this. But when you initially went from what is now the Xfinity Series into the Cup Series, you took an extra season. You had an offer to make the move 1 year before you made it, and you decided on your own to stay down one more year. Is that the type of situation that we're in here with this car? Now, the circumstance is different, but in an ideal scenario, would you have rather stayed the extra year?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, back in '96 when I ran my first season with IRL and started in the Busch Series in NASCAR, at the end of that year, I got hurt at Las Vegas in an Indy car crash, and I was literally recuperating at my mom's house. And I got calls from Rick Hendrick to drive the 25 Cup car, and I also got a call from Barry Green from Team Cool Green to run the IndyCar in the IndyCar Series, and I turned both of those down because I'm like, I'm not ready for that. And my theory was, you work your whole life to climb the ladder, and it's a step at a time. Nobody's jumping steps. It's a step at a time. When you get to that second to last step, you better make sure when you take that step that you're ready for that step. So, and I knew I wasn't ready. I just didn't have enough time yet.
Would that have been the car that Paul Tracy drove that you got offered, or who would have been in that car?
I honestly don't remember who they had in the roster at the time, but it would have been awesome being Paul's.
Oh God, you two together would have been a wrecking machine.
Since we met in Havasu, he's fun to be around. There's no dull moments with him, but he's an awesome guy to hang out with. Loved racing with him in SRX, and I would love to have had that opportunity in the past to race with him.
You mentioned the shoulder injury. Is that related to the surgery you just recently had?
No. What happened with the shoulder, we were at the SRX race at Eldora and won both heat races, and Leah was with us, and she was on a photography stand in turn one, and after the heat, she comes down, and I said, man, my shoulder hurts. And we're laughing about it. I'm like, man, your husband's turning into a wimp. You know, he's not racing every week. He's not race fit anymore. And we just joked about it. Then we go run a 75-lap main, win that, and by the time we got to the airport, took Leah and Ron Capps to Topeka, I couldn't even pick my arm up. And I just thought, man, these muscles are really mad. So I played in a golf tournament the next day in Knoxville, Iowa.
Nice.
And I actually felt a lot better. I probably felt 80% better in the morning. By the time we got through 18 holes, I literally could not lift my left arm up at all. And I'm like, I don't think this is a muscle thing. So Dr. Surface, who's the NHRA doctor, Dr. Heisel, who we call him the NASCAR doctor, goes to the NASCAR races. Both of them, over the course of 2 weeks, had given me a shot in there that just said, this will help it. It lasts less than a day. And I'm like, something is wrong. So Surface got us a MRI in Indianapolis, and the results came back, and he said, I think there's a small tear in your labrum. So literally the day before Thanksgiving, we go. He picks me up at 7 in the morning at the hotel, drives me to the hospital. The last conversation we had while they were prepping me to take me down the hall, I said, listen, you get in there and there's something else that's wrong, fix it. Don't go, well, we haven't talked about it, we'll consult on it, make another. This is a one and done, man. Get in there, you see anything wrong, fix it, and get out of there. So I'm coming out of the anesthesia, and he goes, well, the small labrum tear we thought was 3/4 torn, had bone spurs, had a massive dent in my rotator cuff, which we tracked back to 96 at the IRL race in Las Vegas. Had
So-
a 114 G hit left side.
So it was related to
Yeah.
that same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then there was 4 things that were wrong, and I don't remember what the 4th one was. By that time, I was nauseous and wanting to throw up anyway, thinking about it.
Basically just threw the rods out of the whole program, it sounds
Yeah,
like.
he goes, as soon as I got in there, it was like a yard sale. I'm like, yeah, that's pretty
yard
much what I
sale.
expect when somebody goes in there too. It's like, I'm an organ donor, and at the end of this, everybody's going to look in there and go, yeah, we can't use any of this.
Yeah.
So
Well, you've taken a beating over the years, I guess.
I have not been kind to my
Yeah.
body. And I'm not very smart.
So let's kind of move back to that time frame you talked about, where your career is fascinating for so many reasons, but this idea that you're in an Indy car and you're basically in the Busch series at the same time, and how does one translate to the other, or it doesn't at all, right?
Opposite ends of the spectrum. I mean, I was driving for Harry Ranier in the Busch series at the time. I was driving for Team Menard on the IndyCar side in the IRL. And then you get a kart team that tries to hire you and a cup team that tries to hire you. But it was, I just felt like that was probably one of the biggest keys in my career. I mean, that was a significant moment, even though most people didn't even know it happened. But, I'm in my early 20s and I'm having to make adult decisions about where my career is going to go and who turns down a ride at Hendrick Motorsports.
Oh, yeah.
There hasn't been very many.
As a 20-some-year-old kid, especially.
Yeah.
And that's why, if you think about later in my career in NASCAR, I ran the HendrickCars.com car at the Xfinity race at Daytona the day before the 500, and we won. And Rick told me, he goes, it shut our servers down. It got so much attention.
Yeah.
And that's why you see it on Kyle Larson's car now. It was so successful.
So
I was going to mention, I think the most heroic thing I'm aware of that you've done, which is a lot, is running Indy 500 and then flying to the Coca-Cola 600 on the same day. You did that twice, right?
Yeah, the first time was an absolute disaster. We finished 9th at the Indy 500. We flew down to Charlotte. Indy 500 was hot that day. Flew down to Charlotte. It was really hot when I got to Charlotte. Missed the driver's meeting because of the time, so we had to start at the tail, and worked our way up to 4th that night. But with like 50 laps to go, I'll go back with that. About 100 laps into the race, it's 400 laps, and we get to lap 100, caution comes out, somebody oils the track down. I'm calling on the radio, I'm like, hey, my teammate was Bobby Labonte, and he had just started cycling and all this health stuff. I'm the guy drinking Cokes and eating Oreos in the bus and stuff, and I'm just like,
Yeah, it's me and Brian, we
get
can
that
relate.
crap out of here, So I called on the radio and I said, hey, can you guys go see if Bobby's got any of his energy bars or whatever that crap is he's eating. I said, I'm starving. And I'd ate 2 mini bagels is all I'd ate the whole day. I didn't know anything about nutrition, obviously. But
well, we do
we're
clearly.
brothers.
So, yeah.
But so they go and they find a chocolate power bar or something, and then the drink bottles that we would switch out every stop. They normally would take like Powerade and dilute it half with water. Mm-hmm. It was just straight Powerade. They were like, he's struggling already, and we'd already ran a 500-mile race. So on the live pit stop, switch the bottles out, get the bottle in my lap. They hand in the power bar, got it in my left hand. Drop the jack, I've already got it in first gear, bang, get out on the track. So imagine going to the ice cream shop and they make your soft serve cone and they go, do you want sprinkles on that? So I get on the racetrack, they've got kitty litter out there to try to soak the oil up on the racetrack, and it's swirling around inside the car, and it has coated this chocolate bar.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, we're like a lap into being out there, and I'm trying to cut tires in and this and that. This thing has went from this to, and I got a piece that goes over your nose to keep the air in, and then there's a flap on the bottom. So to get the thing in there, I had to drive the car with my knee, push this flap out, and try to stick this bar up in there to eat it. So the first time was an epic failure. It's all bent over and rolled over. I'm like, I can't even get my mouth over it now. So I'm taking my glove and trying to straighten this out. Well, again, it's hot. So now it's just sticky, and I'm like, this is one of those things where the more I do, the worse this is getting. I got it straightened down. I got one massive, giant bite at this thing, and it was like watching a dog eating peanut butter. It was like, so, but we get to, and it did. It fixed it. It got me through that part of it. We make it to 50 laps to go, and I'm telling you, I did not need to be in a race car at that point. The yellow line's about 6 inches wide, and it looked like it was 3 feet wide, and a hot dog wrapper blew across the backstretch, and I almost called on the radio, there's an elephant with spots on the backstretch.
Yeah.
But the funny part about that when it was over is Dale Sr., we, like I said, we finished fourth, he finished third right in front of us, and they pulled you to the Sunoco pumps after the race, and I'm just sitting in there. I mean, I'm exhausted, and Dale gets out, and I see him walking over, and he's got that eating grin on his face, and I'm like, oh, this isn't going to be good. And he takes the net down for me. He goes, well, kid, you had enough for one day? I said, yeah. He goes, let me help you out. And he helped pull me out of the car. But yeah, it was we learned a lot from that. We did it again 2 years later. We did the first one in 99, second one in 01. Mm-hmm. Joe Gibbs made me hire a trainer. So we had a guy for 3.5 weeks from the Carolina Panthers. And it was their off season. And he literally monitored and gave me everything he wanted me to eat and drink for that 3.5 week period. I lost 6.5 pounds before we even got to race day, just from the diet that he had us on. But the night before the race, he goes, you can have whatever you want. And I ordered a large pizza and mowed through
Just
it.
housed it. Housed the whole
It looked like a Dixie chopper or a Skag mower just plowing through it. There was nothing left. But
it's like Wednesday for Brian.
Yeah, it is. That's how I prepare for these interviews. That's how
I was
I
in
prepare
way
for this
better shape.
podcast.
Yeah, I was in way better shape, though, the second time around. It's like we learned a little bit. We did our homework. We had somebody help us, and it was a way better outcome. We finished 6th at the 500, led the race, had a shot to win. We had a red flag there and had to gamble on, did we come in and take fuel, and then we're going to have to stop one more time. But then if we stopped after pitting, we were only going to have to take half the fuel, so it would save time in the pits. Mm-hmm. Or we stay out in the lead and, hope we catch a caution. Well, we chose let's come in, we'll go for the shorter pit stop. Just before the pit stops happen, caution comes out, and it screwed that whole strategy.
You never really got lured back by the 500. So many guys, I think, over time, you can look back and see how many racers, like, giving it one last shot or kind of trying to get in some car that's not something you would ever do. But did that ever kind of linger in the back of your mind? You never, once you got away from the IndyCar series, the Indy 500 was not something that ever dragged you back.
I wanted it to drag me back. The problem was, early 2000s, drivers weren't any heavier than 165 pounds. I weighed almost 190.
Yeah.
I'm not going on a diet to lose 25 pounds just to run the Indy 500.
Yeah.
So
print that. That's a headline.
Yeah. So that literally was one of
That's
the
a friggin'
deciding
headline.
factors, And honestly, I respect IndyCar so much, and Marco Andretti's friends of mine, Dario Franchitti, Tony Kanaan, Helio, and listening to how technical those cars were, I was going to be at a disadvantage out of the gate because it's just that technical in every form of motorsports that if you're not doing it all the time, you're going to be behind.
Which last night, Brian and I were talking, it's like he never touched F1. It's kind of similar reasoning.
A little bit of touch.
Yeah?
I got 4 laps in Lewis Hamilton's car. We did a seat swap with Mobile One at Watkins Glen.
Yeah.
And that was a blast. Really enjoyed that. The impressive thing wasn't the horsepower or the cornering. It was the thing that impressed me the most is how good the brakes were on it. I always wondered, why do these guys go down and they just plow into each other, or every time they try to pass, I'm like, surely these guys know how to race each other. And then when you get in one of those cars and you realize how short the braking zone is and how much further you have to go than the next guy to get position, it all makes sense why they crash into each other all the time. It's that small of a braking zone that you've got to make up a lot of distance in a short time.
Sprint car racing was and still is a big passion of yours. Recently, you sold the All-Star Series to Kyle Larson, and I think we're seeing an interesting scenario develop in the sprint car racing world. Kind of, what's your take on what's happening there?
I like what Kyle and Brad Sweet, his brother-in-law, are doing. I think they've got big goals. They're trying to. I think it all kind of resonated when Kyle went and started running some dirt late model races, and he's like, man, these guys run for $25,000 a night, and sprint cars on a good night are running for $10,000. So him and Brad got together and tried to figure out how can they keep raising the bar on that, and that's how the High Limit Series started. So, my life's taking twists and turns, and so start writing everything on a piece of paper of what you're doing. It's like, well, 4 Cup teams, 2 Xfinity teams, World Outlaw team, Eldora Speedway, the All-Star Circuit of Champions Sprint Car Series, All-Star TQ Series. I don't have any more room on my plate, you know, and 2 NHRA drag racing teams on top of that. So at some point you go, I've got to start taking stress out of my life. I don't have time for all of this. So, and we have good people. That's the key to all of it. Is everybody goes, how do you do all this? Well, you have good people in place. And I read something after our announcement yesterday. Some know-it-all on the internet said, well, that's it. SHR's over. It's shut the doors down now. I don't make calls on the car anyway.
Right.
It's not going to change. It's not changing one thing that we're doing in North Carolina. No different than it's not changing what we're doing with the sprint car. It's not changing what I'm doing with Eldora Speedway. So people that have that mindset are dumb. They're idiots. Like, they don't know what they're talking about. So it's literally about having the right people in the right places. And if you don't, you can't do that. There's no way I could do all of this. And I'm not the smartest guy. I'm smart enough to know that I need to hire smarter guys than me to do this. And you hire the right people to do the right jobs. And if you get those people, you don't have to micromanage them.
Mm-hmm. I mean, there's a lot of racers that attempt to go into the business of racing that fail miserably at it on a lot of levels. Typically speaking, racers are not good track operators.
No.
Typically speaking, racers are not good team owners.
Yep.
So what separates you from that? Because you are the anomaly in that respect as well. The amount of stuff you're involved in is one thing, but the amount of stuff you're involved in and it's successful, that's the difference. So other than hiring the right people, there's something that you're doing that's different than a lot of other racers.
But that's it.
Yeah.
I'm not doing anything different than that. It's literally, most of those guys that you see get in those situations, they think they know what they're doing. And that's where it goes sideways, because they won't let loose of the control because they're scared to let loose of the control. But I knew going into every one of these ventures that I couldn't do it alone. Yeah. And I needed somebody that was of reasonable sound mind to bounce ideas off of. And I come up with the bad ideas. They say, yeah, that won't work, but that's a good one. And then we execute it. So it's literally surrounding yourself with good people. And honestly, it's that way in life. If people pay attention to that, don't hang around people that don't add value to your life, because you're wasting your life on those people. You're wasting your time.
See, now this is the problem. Yeah, and we immediately come to the same conclusion about each other.
This sort of touches on something I'm curious about what's your relationship with the crew chief and the car itself? Like, getting into a top fuel car, even getting into a stock car, do you know every nut and bolt in the car? I know
no. Absolutely not.
But you can definitely drive the car and identify this thing needs, more wedging or, more degree of caster in the right front.
I'll tell a story on him because he'll laugh about it at this point. Kyle Larson had been in NASCAR for 3 years already in the Cup Series. And there was a race that the oil temp was really hot in the car. Well, the oil tank's right behind the seat. Mm-hmm. And Kyle goes, man, I don't know what this is behind me, but my seat is burning up. Kyle, that's your oil tank behind the seat. That's the oil tank.
Been doing this for 3 years.
Been there every race. So we're not smart as drivers. There's a lot of really smart drivers out there. You go to a sprint car race, you go to a dirt late model race, you go to modified races, Ryan Preece, for example. These guys know every nut and bolt on those cars. I jumped from car to car to car to car, and I raced for multiple teams every year at the same time. I didn't have time for that. My job was to get in there, drive the car, try to win races. My job was not. I learned that from Raleigh Hemling, and that was the car, the Diet Pepsi car that Jeff Gordon drove in the Midget Series in USAC. I drove that car 2 years later, and I'd been working on the TQs I was driving, and then got to the full midget. And when I started with him, I grabbed a wrench one day, and he goes, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "Well, I'm going to help make this change." He's like, "No. Your job's not to work on the race car." He goes, "Go up and watch the racetrack and let us know what the tracks, especially on a dirt track, let us know how the conditions are changing and what we need to be planning for." So it was like, wow, I'm not supposed to know all this. I'm supposed to focus on this area of it. And that's all I've ever done since is my job's to drive the car, pay attention to the racetrack, sit there and go, we're going to have to be way tighter than we are right now, or, I think what we got's good enough, or whatever the deal is. But everybody has that role, and I learned my responsibility is from the firewall to the back of the seat. Nothing in front of that, nothing behind that. This is my area, this is my office, this is my job.
Well, and that leads to there's some awesome video of your in-car communications with the team at some of these races, and
to me, it's great. I mean, it's very honest, and it is as cutting as it gets. So that's a special relationship you have to have as well, right? To be able to talk to those guys in that way and them not just fold up and take it personally and walk off the job.
Yeah, pit crew guys are a special breed because they pour their hearts and souls into building those cars. And then when you get somebody like me that would get mad because of an etiquette deal on the racetrack and then afterwards plow into them, knock the right front off of it, and then you got to go back and face that guy that just spent 12 hours shaping that right front fender. After a while, you sit there and go, man, that's maybe not the right way to handle that. So I learned a lot from that. But yeah, those guys, you have a special relationship. They're your family, but when you start the race like that, everybody's skin gets really thick. Because everybody's pulling the rope the same direction. Everybody wants the same outcome at the end of the day. And when it's not going right and you can't get a handle on it, it is frustrating. You know, and especially that compounds. If you go through 5 or 6 weeks in a row and the car's off, it just builds that frustration. So as a driver, you need them to fix the car so you can do what you need to do, but it just doesn't always work that way.
And in drag racing, this situation exacerbates itself because when you have the bad car for 5 or 6 races in a row, you don't have that much opportunity to fix it, right? It's not, you don't necessarily have the testing schedule. You don't have the number of laps. If you lose 4 or 5 first rounds in a row, it's like this compounding. I mean, I've been involved in the sport for half my life, and it's like you watch that, and some teams deal with it way better than others. And so what is the difference between a team that can take that 5 or 6 weeks of we suck and turn it into success or progress versus the 5 or 6 weeks of we suck and you blow the whole thing up and kind of come to loggerheads on it?
Well, I think having going back to good people, if you have good people there, somebody at whatever position that is going to sit there and go, we have a problem. It's there. We just got to find it. So the difference is the guy that's willing to say, McPhillips, for example, we were at Vegas, second to last event. We'd went out on Saturday. Sunday, as soon as the finals went off, my phone rang. It was Richie. And Richie goes, hey, we found it. And I'm jumping up and down in the hospitality trailer. He goes, but you're going to want to cut your wrist when I tell you. And literally, it was a gram scale it somehow got off calibration and was 30 grams heavy, which doesn't sound like a lot to most people.
Are you hanging weight on the clutch?
In the drag race industry, 30 grams of weight is a ton. And it's like, oh my God. Now, it didn't fix all of our problems, but it fixed 75% of our problems when we recalibrated that. But we went for 4 events struggling and couldn't find it. But that's what you have to have is somebody like Rich Sr. that literally went down to Goodyear the day after. We're out of the event. We're done for the weekend. Sunday, he's going down to Goodyear checking his air gauge, he dug through everything to find that. It's like, man, thank God somebody's willing to work that hard. And where Richie thought I was going to be upside down and want to cut my wrist about it, I said, hey, this is way better than having to go, we found it, but we're going to have to take the car all the way back to Indy from Vegas, cut it, fix it, and then try to get all the way back out to Pomona on time. So knowing what the problem is half of your solution. So if you can get somebody that'll dig and get you that first half, it makes the last half a lot easier.
I think it's interesting, in your first year at TSR Nitro, there was a lot of talk made of the fact that you had a turnkey team on Hagen's program, and you had to put it all together from scratch for Leah's program. And Brian and I are both huge fans and friends of Neil Strasbaugh.
Yeah.
And you look at what happened this last year, you've now got a turnkey top fuel operation, and you as the driver are the new thing. So I think it ties in your stories about how it can be the little things that add up and also how you put the right people in the right places, and bam, you've got a solid team coming into next year.
And I think the key with all that is literally after 2 years of being in the sport, we have had 1 turnover in employees. Okay. And NHRA, as I've learned since I've been around the last 3 years, at the end of the year, it is like the shell game. This guy packs his toolbox, goes 2 blocks down the street to this guy's shop. This guy got fired. He's going over to this guy's shop. This guy got fired. It's not like you're firing people and they're going out and new people are coming in. It's this guy goes from here to here to here to here to here. Mm-hmm. And you're like, wait a minute, wasn't he just there 2 years ago and got let go from there? And now they've hired him back.
Right. And the car sucked then. It is probably going to suck again.
But for us to sit there and go through 2 years in the sport and only have 1 turnover with an employee, I'm really proud of that. We did something that Don Schumacher told me I was absolutely nuts when I did this, but I put my crew chiefs, the car chiefs, I put them all under contract the first year. This year, we put all of the employees under contract. And I think the benefit to that is, whenever, like we said, it's a shell game, guys going here and there. Well, this is the time of year where Paul Lee's got 3 guys on his team right now. Cruz Petragon has 3 guys on his team right now. There's teams that aren't full right now, so everybody's trying to hire people. Well, they're coming after your people as well. So you lock your people down, and B, by locking them down, you show them that you value them and you value what they're doing. So you raise and boost the morale of your organization up right there. So 2 years into this, 1 turnover, we've got a championship and a runner-up with Hagan. Leah has her best career finish in the points with 3rd. It's proof that that's a system that works.
Yeah, and I was going to say, to your point, and you mentioned it, but when you hand that crew guy the contract, which no one's ever handed him before, he goes, oh, like, that's a little piece of stability for those guys that have none, typically, and you've seen in other forms of racing, too, where there are times when a team will hit the skids in the middle of the year and guys are just left with their palms up trying to figure out where they're going to work, let alone the next season. It's what am I going to do next week to feed my family? So the contract thing, to me, I think, once again, it's like the evolution. I had this conversation with a guy about 6 months ago, and he said, well, how does drag racing change professionally? I said, the main thing you're going to see change in the next 5 years is how people are dealt with in this sport, and how that's, whether it's contracting crew guys and valuing them differently, it's how the teams are physically set up and operated, it's how announcements and things are made, it's how, because right now we have 2 very divergent paths in the sport. We have the path that you're on, which is the good one, where you have a plan, you have media around you, you have people that are in supporting roles, the people that, as you like to say, are smarter than you at these things. Then we have other situations where people are putting press releases out announcing the hiring of people they haven't even spoken to yet. Yeah. That's not good.
Yeah.
That's a clown show.
That's like getting a small little toy pistol and pointing it down your foot going, I don't remember if I put one in this chamber or not.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
but again, that's one of the things, the hidden things that you have brought into professional drag racing is the idea of doing things at a higher level, looking at yourself in a different way. Because I think a lot of people in drag racing at all levels don't value themselves enough. They don't think we're a big enough deal. It's almost like we don't feel like we deserve certain things, which we do.
I think at the same time too, it's a culture that has been doing the same thing for a long time. And so having the ability to come from NASCAR, come from IndyCar, come from USAC, World of Outlaws, owning a racetrack, learning all these things about how to deal and manage people, or deal with people and manage people, you bring fresh ideas into a new sport when you go there, and then all of a sudden you start being a part of the evolution and changing of how procedures are done, how things are done. But it is, we gave those guys their contracts, the crew guys, and they thought they were getting termination papers. It's like, no, I want you to stay here. But you could tell they were confused because they've never had that. Nobody's ever said, hey, I really like what you're doing. I really want you to come back next year. I want you to sign a contract knowing that you've got a job all year. You're going to get paid all year no matter, obviously you go do something stupid. We got to let you go. We got to let you go. But if you don't do that, you are absolutely can go home to your wife and go, I'm solid for the whole year. It's right here.
Yeah, it's big.
Yeah.
I think the first time I physically saw you at an NHRA race, you were actually yelling at another team owner, who I won't name, and I asked Leah, like, what's he doing over there? And she told me that guy was trying to snipe some of your people.
So that guy was a funny car driver / owner.
Yep.
And his 2 crew chiefs bailed and went to a different organization that was starting up. And so again, that driver has to fill those roles. Well, he's not going to go pick guys he's not going to try to take a step backwards. So what do? You go after good people. He came after our people. We had him under contract. But it ticked me off because I'd kind of, I'd started doing some stuff around this guy and with this guy, and I would have done it different. I would have said, listen, I know this isn't a great thing to do, but this is a scenario I'm in. I've got to find people. I'm probably going to ask your people, if they're interested. And ultimately, on a normal deal, if they're not on a contract, it's up to them whether they want to do it or not. But at least you're honest with somebody and
forthright,
can look eye to eye, man to man, and say, yeah, this is a scenario, man. I have to try to hire good people. I'm going to talk to your guys.
Yeah.
Instead, they went in there and those guys said, hey, we're under contract. And he said, well, we can get you out of your contract. So I don't really give two craps about this guy anymore. He can kiss my.
Perfect. Okay. Perfect segue to my next question, which is you were talking about sort of the cultural differences between your other sanctioning bodies and the NHRA. And one of them is at NHRA, there's sort of a love fest between teams. You see the drivers at the top end, they always say, oh, we really respect the other team. And it's like a big family and everything. When does smoke show up at NHRA drag racing?
Well, if the smoke I'm thinking you're talking about, I don't think it will happen. I mean, I know because, I spent time when I started hanging around Leah. I've known Cruz Petragon forever and Antron and Caps. And, I was sitting with Petragon one night and I'm like, why do you guys all get ticked off at each other? I said, and normally it's if somebody, the biggest thing and the biggest no-no is hanging somebody out. And it's like, in the rule book, as soon as both teams pre-stage, as soon as that first driver stages, it starts a 7-second clock. Not a 3, not a 12. It's a 7-second clock. It's in the rule book. You know that's what it is. You have every ability to take 6.9 seconds if you want before you stage. But that other driver on the other end wants to rip you through your seatbelts and pull you out of the car. And I'm like, why y'all get mad about that? And they said, well, it's not because it's a rule infraction. It's an etiquette thing. So, but it's like, well, be prepared for it. You know, they might go in half a second after you, or they might take 6.9 seconds, but it's not illegal. So you better be prepared for it, because if I'm a driver and I'm a competitor and it's coming down to nut crunching time, I'm going to use every card in my deck that I know is a trick that I think is going to help me get where I need to be. And that's how I've won national championships my whole career, sitting there going, okay, restart zones. Well, you can take off here, you can take off here. Well, nobody takes off in the same spot every time, because then everybody else starts anticipating it. So every restart, you pick a different spot to try to make them guess on when you're going to hit the gas. So those are the things that you have to do as a driver. But the things that always made me mad, and all the blow-ups and everybody thought I was just off my rocker, it wasn't about wanting to be mad. It was about etiquette. It was about what Dale Sr., Dale Jarrett, Mark Martin, Bobby Labonte, Jeff Burton, Jeff Gordon, what all these veteran drivers taught me when I came into NASCAR. And then you got all these new guys coming in, and they don't care about etiquette. They're simple-minded, they tunnel vision, they don't give a crap about anybody but themselves. And now you look at the racing, nobody gives an inch. Nope,
Well, look, and just, agree or disagree, but the way that the Truck Series finished this year was a disaster.
Terrible.
I mean, to me, it's like, and I like to follow that stuff. I like to follow the young talent, but that was just, it was almost unwatchable at the end. And it's, the bicycle helmet theory, a lot of people like to throw out there with some of this stuff, which is the better you make the bicycle helmet, the more ridiculous risks people are willing to take. And you got a lot of young kids. I mean, I'm literal kids, late teenagers, early 20s in those trucks, and they treat them like they're at a demolition derby.
And they don't have a dime in it, and they don't have a man hour in a car or a truck. Yeah. But it was embarrassing to watch the race. It was even equally as embarrassing to watch the champion do his media interviews at the end of it. And you want to celebrate with your team, but have enough composure to get through your media interviews and then go back to your team. And if you want to get blitzed and do stupid stuff, that's totally fine. But I'm watching the kid do his post-race media session, and I'm like, oh my God. I mean, you hope his sponsors stay there for next year, because the kid did a great job. I mean, he earned a championship. He deserved it, but it just shows the mentality of some of these younger guys of like, they don't think about everything, or they don't care about it like they need to care about it, because everybody's watching. So it was always an etiquette thing with me. And what I was taught, and what I said, what I was taught, that this is acceptable, this is not acceptable. Well, as soon as we lost Dale Sr., we started losing all of that. As soon as he went away, all the etiquette started going away. Jeff Burton was that's why he got the nickname the Mayor. Jeff was the one that kind of kept control of everybody. So the hard part is there is nobody in that role now. All the veteran guys that race that way, and part of that is not just these young drivers. Part of that is a product of the evolution of the sport. The cars are better. The cars are closer. Tires don't fall off like they used to. That was a big part of the game. I remember going to Rockingham, and Mark Martin was awesome at Rockingham and Xfinity and Cup. And you'd run him down and 8 laps into a run, and crew chiefs yelling on the radio, take care of the tires. I'm like, I am. You'd get to Mark would just pull over a lane to the inside and let you drive right on by, and he'd tuck back in. And you'd drive a half a straightaway away from him, and you're like, man, I am doing it. I kicking his ass today. And it'd be about 30 laps, 35 laps later, and you look in your mirror, and Mark's car's getting bigger and bigger. And then the same thing, he extended that courtesy, you do the same thing. And you let him go, and you're like, how did he do that? And he just took care of his tires better than what I was taking care of my tires, but that's how you learn. But that's not even in play now with the Cup cars. It's track position so important, aero so important, the tires don't fall off enough. So it's created this, screw your etiquette. I got to take care of my position here and get everything I can get.
Okay.
Last question.
Oh man, I've got a couple quick ones. First of all, I know the whole story about how you connected with Leah and everything, but the short version people hear is Don Prudhomme introduced you guys. What I want to know is, how did you know Don Prudhomme and why? And how were you out like riding around the dunes with him?
Well, I'd met him before, but we were at Ron Pratt's in Glamis, and Jeff Gordon, Ray Evernham, Rusty Wallace, myself, Greg Biffle, Snake was there obviously, and I was engaged at the time. Leah was married at the time. He goes, hey man, you know how Snake
Oh,
is.
Snake's
Hey,
the
man,
coolest.
kid,
She's really cool, man.
You need to meet this girl. You guys get each other. And I'm like, dude, I'm engaged. And she's married. He's like, no, man, I don't mean that way. He goes, you guys just need to meet. So I'm like, man, I don't have time for this. So we go through the whole next season after that. And we're watching, I'm sprint car racing and all that still. And so every week we're watching Proc because he ran his midget out of our shop in Brownsburg. And so we would always want to see how he qualified. And that's how I started watching Leah too, because Snake goes, you got to meet her. So literally the next year, my engagement is off big time. Get out of here, pack your crap and get out. Leah's separated now, like legally separated. And same thing, get your stuff and get out. And so we're back at Pratt's at the dunes again, and he gets her on FaceTime, and literally Jeff Gordon and Clint Boyer and I are there that year, and we're fighting over an iPhone. And I'm like, we're going to break this iPhone, but this one's married and wants to talk to her. This one's married. I'm single. I am committing. I'm maximum effort. I am diving in. I about broke my hand grabbing the phone. We talked for about 40 minutes on FaceTime, and then literally the first time we physically met each other was at a manager's meeting for one of the auto part retailers. And I never get anywhere early. I'm always late, damn near for everything. I got there a half hour early. Leah got there 20 minutes early, and we were in the green room together. And that's where it started. And we went on our first date in Gainesville, literally the Monday of the week that Friday COVID shut everything down. And then our second date, I went out to Havasu to hang out a couple of days because everything shut down.
I know this story.
Yeah.
So
you were there 4 months, right?
Went for 4 days and came back home 4.5 months later. She got so tired of doing my laundry because I took 5 days of clothes with me.
Yeah, you just had to keep cycling this stuff
every 3 to 4 days she's having to do laundry, and she didn't like doing laundry. Her ex-husband did the laundry in the family. I'm like, I haven't done laundry in my life. I'm like, I am a survivor. I have survived not getting in the laundry.
Did you need the clothes?
Yeah, I couldn't wear hers, and I'm not that guy that's going to turn my underwear inside out and go, yeah, we're good for today now. So,
well, man, thank you for taking the time to do this. I know your schedule at these events is absolutely insane, but appreciate the insight. I think people certainly learned a little bit about your past, and
God,
again,
I hope they don't pass judgment on that.
No, listen, dude. The impressive part to me is obviously the accomplishments inside the race car, one thing, but you've built something pretty incredible with the rest of your life, whether it's Eldora, the multiple race teams, the drag racing element of it. It's a very impressive thing. And
in 2024, you have an opportunity to be Rookie of the Year once again.
Yes.
at the massive age of 53 by that time. So, it's I've learned, the biggest thing I've learned in motorsports in my entire life is never say never. They're like, oh, you're going to end up here one day. I'm like, no, I'm not. Yeah, I am. So at some point, every time they say something, eventually I end up there in some capacity. But I've always enjoyed doing that. I've always been one of those guys that I didn't thrive on trying to find projects that people said I couldn't do. But every time you went to make a step, you always get those people that are like, well, he's not going to figure this car out. I figured those out. He's not going to figure this one out. And then that's just a little bit more motivation to figure it out and do a good job in it. So I've always liked that, but it's not been my motivation.
Thanks, everybody, for watching this episode of the Hot Rod Pod, where it all began. Tony was great. Freiberger was fun hanging out, as always. And we're going to crank out some more episodes here at the PRI show. We'll be back with more right here on the Hot Rod Pod soon.